The Da Vinci Code was based on fact. There are those who would have us believe that the Da Vinci Code is pure fiction, but if that were so, then why do so many of its assertions check out? For example, what are the chances that Don Brown just happened to get it right when it comes to this particular detail about Mary Magdalene? Well, I'm going to explain what the novel got right and wrong, and what the true meaning of the sacred feminine is. You don't want to miss this. Hey everyone, it's me. Welcome to my channel where we unlock the secrets of the past to see how they affect us today. This week, I'll be answering the question, was the Da Vinci Code right about Mary Magdalene? If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe and click that notification bell so that you never miss an upload. And if you enjoy what you see, please consider supporting us through the provided means. It appears that Don Brown did his homework and came to some very interesting conclusions regarding Mary Magdalene. So what did he get right? Let's start at the beginning. In the novel, Mary Magdalene is portrayed as Jesus' closest disciple, even suggesting that they were romantically involved. Some critics say this isn't possible since Mary Magdalene was a prostitute. However, there's no biblical evidence to support that claim. That detail only came into existence after someone added it to a sensationalist book titled The Club and Nicked, which was written 1,000 years after Mary Magdalene's death. But I digress. What's more important is that Don Brown was right in stating that Mary Magdalene was one of Jesus' most faithful disciples. In fact, outside of Judas Iscariot, she's mentioned by name more than any other disciple in the New Testament. She was present at Jesus' crucifixion and was the first person to whom Jesus appeared after his resurrection. Clearly, Mary Magdalene had a special place in Jesus' heart. In the novel, Don Brown suggested that Mary Magdalene was present during the Last Supper, which makes sense given her status as Jesus' favorite disciple. However, the Bible doesn't mention her being present. It should be noted that the Bible doesn't say much about the Last Supper in the first place, so we have little information to go off of. And this is where the story gets really interesting. Leonardo da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper is arguably the most famous depiction of the event. And according to Brown, it was Da Vinci's way of encoding secret messages about Mary Magdalene. So what exactly is Da Vinci trying to tell us? Well, to answer that, let's look at two main symbols in the painting. First, we have Mary Magdalene herself. As we look closer, we notice that John, the apostle, leans against Jesus, and Mary Magdalene is placed directly opposite him. Don Brown suggests that this is how Leonardo da Vinci indicated that Mary Magdalene and John were the same person. Hence, Mary Magdalene was Jesus' beloved disciple. However, I'd like to offer another interpretation. Have you noticed that Mary Magdalene looks strikingly similar to Jesus? This detail wasn't lost on Don Brown or those who followed the Gnostic tradition. Since Mary Magdalene is believed to be Jesus' twin sister in the bloodline of David, it's entirely possible that Leonardo da Vinci intended to portray Mary Magdalene as Jesus' sister instead of his beloved disciple. And if you think that sounds far-fetched, stay tuned until the end of the video. We're going to be looking at another symbol in the painting that supports this idea. Now moving on to the second symbol, we have the placement of the cup on the table in front of Jesus. In the novel, Brown says that the chalice symbolizes the feminine divine, but he's not the first to make that connection. According to church historian Hegesippus, who wrote around 170 AD, the chalice was used by Mary Magdalene herself. In the Gospel of Philip, also part of the Gnostic scriptures, we read that Mary Magdalene poured the perfume from the jar onto Jesus' feet and wiped them with her hair, which caused Jesus to say, "Mary has anointed me for my burial." Some early Christians believed that Mary Magdalene would use the chalice to collect Jesus' blood during the crucifixion. Because of this belief, the chalice became known as the Holy Grail, a term that didn't originate from the novel The Da Vinci Code. In fact, the earliest printed record of the phrase Holy Grail can be found in a 12th century manuscript titled the Histoire del Saint Grail, meaning the history of the Holy Grail. So putting these symbols together, we have the possibility that Mary Magdalene is Jesus' twin sister, which would certainly explain why he chose her to be his closest disciple. This would also mean that the chalice represents the sacred feminine, something that Leonardo da Vinci may have been trying to tell us. But what does that actually mean? The sacred feminine is a term that refers to the divine feminine, a concept that goes back thousands of years to the earliest days of paganism. Even the Hebrew Bible contains multiple references to the sacred feminine, such as Proverbs 18:22, which reads, "He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord." In that verse, The Hebrew word for wife is neshima, which means breath. Interestingly enough, the Hebrew word for spirit is also ruach, which means wind or air. Some scholars suggest that the author of Proverbs is hinting at the notion that finding a wife is like obtaining a bit of the divine spirit. If that's true, it could mean that women are considered vessels of the divine feminine. During the time of Jesus, the idea of the sacred feminine was incredibly popular. The Gospel of Mary, part of the Gnostic scriptures, shows us just how popular it was. In that text, Mary Magdalene is portrayed as the main disciple because she received the teachings that Jesus gave to his disciples. When Jesus spoke in parables, Mary was the only one who understood what he meant. When the other disciples criticized her for understanding, Jesus said, "Whoever listens to what Mary says in all my teachings will receive many tears. For she will not pour forth her sayings as a woman who is frivolous, for the light has been revealed to her." Because of this emphasis on the sacred feminine, some scholars suggest that the disciples argued over whether Jesus' mother, Mary, was actually the vessel of the divine feminine. The argument went something like this. Yes, Mary gave birth to Jesus, but she was just a simple Galilean peasant. How could she possibly be a vessel of the divine feminine? And this is where things get very interesting. Dan Brown's novel suggests that Mary Magdalene took on the persona of a man after leaving the Middle East and traveled to France, where she eventually settled in the south near the town of Rennes-le-Château. Some critics scoff at this idea, but they aren't aware that there's actually a historical precedent for Mary Magdalene traveling to France. The Chronicle of Moissac, a manuscript from the 13th century, tells the story of a hermit named Stachy who lived in a cave in the mountains near Moissac. One day, Stachy encountered a beautiful woman in his cave. She introduced herself as Mary and told him that she wanted to live out the remainder of her life in solitude. Stachy agreed to leave her alone, but every morning he would go to her cave to bring her provisions. Over time, the two developed a close relationship, and eventually Stachy's bishop asked him to marry Mary. So down the two went to the local priest and told him to wed them. After they were married, Mary and Stachy lived together in the nearby town, and they were visited by people from all over the region because of Mary's fame. Now, there's no explicit evidence that this Mary was Mary Magdalene, but many believe that it was her. Why else would a woman of questionable character travel all the way to southern France to live out the remainder of her life in solitude? Unless she was trying to hide from the authorities. And why would she become the center of attention once again, if she valued solitude so highly? Dan Brown's novel is set in the south of France, and he likely chose that location for a reason. Perhaps he was familiar with this legend and decided to incorporate it into his novel. Or perhaps he accidentally stumbled upon the truth and unknowingly chose the correct location. Either way, it's clear that Mary Magdalene had a major impact on early Christianity. So if the Da Vinci Code got the basics about Mary Magdalene right, then what did it get wrong? We know that Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute, and there's no evidence that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were romantically involved. What's most likely is that Mary Magdalene was Jesus' twin sister, which is why Leonardo da Vinci painted her with Jesus' facial features. This would also explain why she was the main character in the Gnostic Gospel of Mary and why Jesus allowed her to sit in the place of honor at the Last Supper. Not only was Mary Magdalene the sacred feminine in terms of representing the divine feminine, she was literally the sacred feminine in the sense that she was Jesus' sister. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my other content on the secrets of the past. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks. Bye.